I mean, so you're orange pilled, but when did you start to get the like philosophical implications of Bitcoin or the larger geopolitical implications,
Yeah.
if you want to look at it that way? When did that start to like really hit you?
I don't know that I ever thought about that before. So my coming out of a career in finance, traditional finance, my focus was from an investment point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And then I orange pilled Saylor, right? And that process took me down a lot of rabbit holes that I hadn't taken myself down. As you know, better than anyone at this point, after what, 20 some odd hours, right? The man asked some questions. And so he quickly, over the course of a few weeks, ran down every Bitcoin path there was to find out that I just didn't have any more information on that topic.
Was this 2020?
Yeah.
That it started? Okay.
2020.
So after...
It was during COVID.
Okay.
We were spending a lot of time hanging out at his place here.
Got it.
Pretty comfortable surroundings, better than my apartment.
Yeah.
And talking about the world, trying to figure out what was going on. Things were, really irrational.
Yeah.
Everything's closed. Stock market's going up.
Yeah.
This didn't make sense to us. We're like, just can't be this way. Businesses need to be open to do well.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we were exiting our investments, and I'd been talking about Bitcoin a lot. And usually when I brought it up, it's like, wasn't a topic of interest to him. But due to the fact that the world had changed so much and we were trying to make sense of things, this time when I brought it up, during COVID, his response was different. He said, tell me more about that, and that's what we talked about for a few weeks. And then at the end of that few weeks, he said, well, if I wanted to buy some of this, how would I go about buying it? And then I got him set up to buy it. And then a couple months actually go by because it took a while to get set up back then. And unbeknown to me, by the way, was that he was thinking about what to do with MicroStrategy's money. That never came into our conversations. And then, a couple months go by and I'm pulling into a restaurant down here to meet some folks, and the phone rings and it's Saylor. And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I bought Bitcoin. And I'm like, great. And at the time, Bitcoin was like exactly 10,000 for Bitcoin. He's like, yeah, 10,000. And I was like, you bought one Bitcoin? And he's like, no, Eric, I bought 10,000 Bitcoin. So like in like one sentence, I went from being really excited that I got him into Bitcoin to like, oh my God, $100 million of personal, not corporate.
Yeah.
It was a big investment. So yeah.
Were you consciously trying to orange pill him at the time, or were you just talking
I've been trying to orange pill him for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was. But for me, to go back to your original question, like it was an investment. It was an investment for me. Yeah. And it was after Michael got into it, because when he got into it, he was forced to look at things from a different angle and reconsider everything, right? To use it as a store of value for the $500 million that his company had on the balance sheet. So he's the one who kind of like tilted things and looked at it a little differently. And, as a result of being the person who orange pilled him, I also became, the person who talked to him throughout this entire journey and shared a lot of learnings and observations. And I had the benefit of having the smartest person I've ever met, share some of these observations with me and think them through with me. And so it was through his realizations, observations, debunking a lot of things that we thought were true that aren't true, and going up this learning curve of things that we thought we learned in school or business school or whatever, that we realized maybe we didn't really learn these things. Maybe we just learned the version that they wanted us to know. And so it was as a result of going through this journey with Michael that I started to question more things, not just in traditional finance, but as you know, you start questioning everything. And it's like, well, what else have I been, I don't want to say lied to about, but what else have I just accepted what I've been told instead of questioning it?
Yeah, other things you've accepted at face value.
Yeah.
Rather than doing the work, so to speak, to understand it at a deeper level.
Yeah, it's worse than that, I think. It's a little more pernicious than that because you go to school to learn and you just assume that the curriculum and these things your teachers in as low as grade school and as high as graduate school are teaching you are to a degree correct.
Yeah.
Right. And if they're not correct, they're telling you that there's a lot of subjectivity here.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's not what happens. What happens is you're told, this is the history of this country. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You read some Rothbard and you realize that's not the history of this country at all.
Yeah.
That's actually not what happened. Right. And so that's changed the way I view a lot of things.
And so, because obviously he's very philosophically, it's more than just to buy Bitcoin and use it for its utility, right? You almost get on this mission basically, right? Where, hey, we see world history a different way. We see another path forward for the human race, not to sound too grandiose, but it really is that, right? It's shifting an entire economic paradigm that's really antithetical to central banking in almost every way, right? It's central bank is closed source, opaque, prints money ad infinitum. Bitcoin's open source, radically transparent, and it does quantitative tightening instead of quantitative easing. So it's this major shift in paradigm.
They have different purposes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the risk of oversimplifying it, central banks are there to perpetuate the nation state, and Bitcoin is there to perpetuate the holder.
The individual.
The individual, company, country, but the holder of the asset.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does that do? Like, why? I guess the unanswered question in Bitcoin is, why is this thing inspiring such deep personal transformations in the lives of, it's not just holding Bitcoin. You also have to kind of study it and, get on that mission basically. But what is it about Bitcoin that causes it to give its adherents, I guess would be the term, this transformative potential in their lives?
It's a good question. I think first of all, it's not everyone that starts to question things, right?
Yeah.
The majority of my investors in Bitcoin Investment Group, which is for family offices and high net worth individuals, very few of those people are questioning things. They're saying, okay, it looks like this thing's gaining traction, might be a digital gold, price is going to go up. I want some of it.
Buy some,
right? They're not saying, is the medical complex fucking with my health, right? Or, are the numbers coming out of the government bullshit? That's not the path they're going down. But once you've done your 100,000+ hours of Bitcoin, it forces you to question things, right? Like, you wouldn't need Bitcoin so much if the inflation rate was the 2 or 3% that the government tells you that it is.
Yeah.
But like, something doesn't feel right there, right? Like, the price of the things we want are not 2 to 3% more. They're 50% more, 100% more, it's like, and so something is just not passing the sniff test. And so then you start questioning and you're like, well, what goes into this inflation number? What's the basket of goods that they're using? Why did this used to be in the basket of goods and it's no longer in the basket of goods anymore?
Why are food and energy not in there?
Right. And it's like, well, the prices of those things have gone up too much. We can't keep them in there anymore. We need, we're going to make a rational substitution. You don't need the price of a movie ticket to be in there because that's gone from 50 cents to $15. You don't need that in there. But we can value what watching a movie's worth, and you can get Netflix for $15 a month and you can have 500,000 movies. So $15 divided by 500,000, however they jerry-rig their bullshit so that they get the answer they want, which is inflation's low, the utility you're getting, whatever, right? So once you start realizing that they're fucking you like that and you're just kind of accepting these numbers that you're being fed, then it makes you question stuff. And it only takes to the objective, rational person who's interested in learning. And, it's really is the matrix, right? Like, do you want to take the pill or not? Like, ignorance really can be bliss, So it's like once you get one data point that you realize was bullshit, and then you start questioning, you're like, well, what else?
Yes.
You know, it's like when your girlfriend catches you lying. You know, it's like, well, you lied about that one little insignificant thing. What else are you lying about? You know, it's the same kind of unraveling. And it's like
they say sometimes when a murderer is caught, a whole string of crimes is solved. You know, it's you pull the thread, right? And then something can come unraveled.
Exactly. And then the scary thing is, like, it can come unraveled in any area you want to look at. It's not just finance and money. You can look at it as it relates to health or food or, you know, all these other things. Media. Yeah, exactly.
World history, to your point.
The scariest thing for me is like health too. It's like I started questioning those things too. You get your cholesterol taken, it's high. Well, we need to start you on this statin. And it's like, you do? Why? Because there was one study done about cholesterol that shows a correlation between heart disease and high cholesterol. But correlation isn't causation, right? So like, does the presence of high cholesterol mean that I'm going to have heart problems? You know, so it's like you start questioning these things, whereas like the medical complex is just like, my doctor's like, here, take this statin. And I'm like, well, I'm told there's good and bad cholesterol. Which one do I have? He's like, well, we don't know. And I was like, well, how do we find out? He's like, well, you can go get this CT scan with, you know, dye injected, but it's not covered by insurance. It's going to cost you $5,000. I'm like, let's do it. I'm not taking a medication for the rest of my life. Turns out, you know, a score of 0 to 5, I was a 1, you know? And it's like, he's like, yeah, you don't need to take this shit at all. I'm like, great. But like, you would have had me taking it. So you just start questioning things, which I think is healthy, but it's also a little, can be depressing, you know?
Can be depressing. Yeah. Especially, but this is probably the downside to getting into Bitcoin, actually, especially if you don't have others around you that are getting into it, because it can cause you to start to see the world in this new light, which is, well, maybe that's a bad metaphor, because it's actually, you're starting to see the darkness of the world in many ways, right?
You could take the positive view. You're taking away the darkness. You're seeing the light. You're
seeing the truth. Yeah. But the truth, it can be bleak sometimes,
it can certainly be different than what you thought.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're going through that intellectual journey and you're not joined by some party members, then that can get lonely. That can get, and a lot of Bitcoiners say that, actually, when you see them at conferences, they seem really relieved to be, you know, surrounded by people that just get it and understand.
People think the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.